A few days ago, I posted my 7WSM range result video, and it got a few people upset because I showed a 7WSM with 175 grain ELDX getting faster velocities than a 7PRC. And of course, I got the typical comments of that I am a 7PRC hater. And at this point, I think I'm just going to embrace it. Another comment was that all I ever do is prop up or hype up the Weatherby cartridges and put down some of the others like the 7PRC. This video is a response to that comment. I'm going to admit this one's going to be a little hard for me to do because I do love my Weatherby cartridges. I'm definitely a fanboy of them. But I can see how people think they are definitely overrated. So we're going to look at the top 3 overrated Weatherby cartridges. Let's talk criteria. First of all, whenever I do these overrated cartridge videos, I have to pick cartridges that have been commercially successful. So that's criteria number 1. These Weatherby cartridges have to be successful. I can't just pick a 224 Weatherby and call it the most overrated cartridge, because does anyone really care? No one even buys that cartridge. Number 2 really goes closely with number 1, is it has to be a popular Weatherby cartridge. Again, it's very tied closely to the first one, being successful. How can you overrate a cartridge if no one gives a crap, or there is no fan base to that cartridge? So that's really the criteria. Has to be successful, has to have some type of loyal fan base that overrates it. Whenever you Google most overrated hunting cartridges, a lot of the journals come up, and look at that. How could they? 300 Weatherby? Coming in at number 3, this one hurts because this is also my personal favorite Weatherby cartridge. It's the 300 Weatherby Magnum. Now, Weatherby's most popular cartridge is this one. It's a darn good performer, but I think there's 3 reasons why this is a top 3 most overrated Weatherby cartridge, and why it's usually included in articles about most overrated cartridges. Number 1 reason, cost of ammo. It's no secret, Weatherby ammo is ridiculously expensive. Their Select Plus ammo, you are looking at around $100 to $110 for a box of 20 ammo, which is crazy expensive. Number 2 reason why it is one of the most overrated Weatherby cartridges is exactly when you compare it to a 300 Winchester Magnum that's so much cheaper in factory ammo. And you know, typically your 300 Win Mag factory ammo is kind of anemic. You know, you're shooting a 180 grain at 2960, while the 300 Weatherby is shooting a 180 grain over 3200. You can get ammo from like Hornady that has super performance, where you're shooting a 180 grain at a little over 3100 feet per second. And there's other companies that will give you 180 grains at over 3100. So especially when you use that type of ammo and compare it to the Weatherby when they're only about 100 to 150 feet per second difference, yeah, the cost, I don't know if it's justified. Point number 3 of why the 300 Weatherby is a bit overrated is, as of in 2024, really, for the most part, you can only get a 300 Weatherby and a Weatherby rifle. And honestly, Weatherby makes really good rifles, but a lot of people don't want to spend the extra cash, say on like a Mark V Deluxe, and maybe they want something different than a Vanguard. And that's really your only options. Yes, there are exceptions out there. You could get an older used rifle that's made by Remington or Winchester, and sometimes they do specials with Rugers in 300 Weatherby. But for the most part, if you want a Weatherby cartridge, you got to buy a Weatherby rifle. I'm not sure that's a bad thing, but I understand the complaint because they are expensive rifles. Coming in at number 2 for the second most overrated Weatherby cartridge is this big bad boy, the 30-378 Weatherby Magnum. Now, this cartridge has the title for the fastest commercially offered 30 caliber Magnum, and it is crazy performance, but you are paying a lot, not just in the wallet, but in powder to get those velocities, to get that crown, you could say. So let's take a deep dive into it. This is the 3378 Weatherby next to my 300 Weatherby, and on average there is about 150 to 200 feet per second difference between the 3378 Weatherby and the 300 Weatherby. Now, as a reloader, what do you have to burn? Like, how much powder do you have to burn to get that extra, at most 200 feet per second? You have to burn 110 to 120 grains of powder, while in the 300 Weatherby, you're burning 80 to 85 grains of powder. That is a huge increase of powder for a little bit more velocity. I know, guys, this is rough. I keep having to show you my Mark V Deluxe, but this is my last point with the 3378 Weatherby. You can only get it in a Mark V. So it's really limited with your options on guns. So if you're not a particular fan of the Mark V, unless you build a custom gun, you can't get a 3378 Weatherby. Drum roll, and the number one most overrated Weatherby cartridge is the 65300 Weatherby Magnum. First off, I got to talk about why this cartridge is awesome. Number one, it is the flattest shooting commercial cartridge you can get. It is also the fastest 6.5 cartridge you can get. But now let's talk about why it's the most overrated. First point for me, and this is something I haven't really brought up before, extremely short barrel life. This is the king of short barrel life. I have heard rumors and people telling me that you could expect your accuracy to start getting worse around 500 rounds. That's not a lot of shots. Point number two, and it has the exact same problem the 3378 Weatherby has, is to get these fast velocities, you are burning so much powder. You have to burn 80 to 90 grains of powder, which that's a lot in a 6.5 cartridge. And on this overbore issue and burning a ton of powder, now the parent case to the 6.5 300 is the 300 Weatherby. Let's just give an example. If I shot a 140 grain bullet out of my 300 Weatherby, I would easily see velocities in the 3,600, maybe 3,700 feet per second. In a 6.5 300, I would be pushing it pretty hard to get 3,450, maybe 3,500 feet per second. You're losing out on a lot of velocity, and that's why it's probably one of the most overbore cartridges ever made. Lastly is, yes, it's extremely fast. Yes, it's extremely flat, but it's still a 6.5 cartridge. Okay, let's pump the brakes. Before you think I've gone completely rogue, I think the 300 Weatherby, the 3378 Weatherby, and the 6.5 300 Weatherby are extremely awesome cartridges. But as I mentioned, there are some downsides to it. The cost and the barrel life and yada, yada, yada. With that being said, I think I'm going to get all three of those. I already have the 300, so